There you go, okay. So a quick agenda. So I'll start with my introduction by myself and about this talk, what this talk is about and not about. And we'll go into 5 years at Fintech startup. So I worked at a company called 𝗙𝗧𝗏, and I'm going to be talking about it briefly, and how it started, how I joined, and how it has been in 5 years. And there will be some life and death moments that I would like to share. And this is not something that's just for Fintech, but I think for any startup or any business really, to go through some moments like that, and we would like to share my experience. And then we'll have a quick recap at the end. And the slide is available at this link or this QR code, but just a disclaimer that there wouldn't be too much in the slide, so maybe if you want to have a look, you can, but I think you have a lot covered just by looking at it. So, introduction of myself. So I'm Ryota. I'm a principal engineer at Civo. So Civo is a cloud provider, and kind of you can think of it as AWS or GCP competitor, I would say. And I'm passionate about learning, building, and sharing all things technology. And have a son and 2 cats. You can see the photos with my cats. And that's what I usually use. The bottom right is the one that I use in most of the places, GitHub, Twitter, X, and Mastodon, and all that. And about this talk. So, quick disclaimer, so this is based on my personal experience, so it's not that I'm talking about on behalf of the company really. I tried to make it as personal and not sales-like as possible. And this is based on learnings from the nature of the Fintech and startup. And startup success, it has been 5 years, and I would say it's a success. And from engineer perspective, so we'll go into that. And this is not going to be about technical details. I usually give the talk around technical detail and do a tech demo, but this time around, I decided not to. I think the Fintech is not just about technical implementations, and a few things that I wanted to highlight from my personal experiences. And this is not going to be about fundraising because I didn't do it, I wasn't involved with it, but it's definitely a part of the journey, but we'll not be talking about it. So 5 years at Fintech startup. So about 𝗙𝗧𝗏. So it's a, come on, there you go. Fintech startup providing B2B payment solution, and adopted by 35,000 plus companies. And you probably have never heard of it. The reason I will be talking about it in a bit. The retention rate of the customers, the companies, is over 99%, which is something that we are proud of, and that's something that I had to put into the slide. I was told that this is something that we are very proud of and always put in the slide. I was like, okay, fair enough. Headquartered is based in Japan. So I'm here, I have been here for the entire 5-year journey, and that's the remote team is around the world. The business is mainly focusing mainly in Japan. The headquarters is in Tokyo, and for that reason, probably you've never heard of it, but the company is one of the leading players in the Japanese market. And how it started. So I'm going to briefly talk about it before getting into the life and death moments, the exciting bits. So the company was founded in May 2018, and so the CEO and co-founder is a friend of mine in London, so I got to know him in 2017, and we were talking about starting a company, but I didn't join. I was like, no, I'm not going to Japan. So he went to Japan, he started his company. And I joined as a part-time, kind of as a first engineer in September 2018, so it's been more like 6 years now. And I joined as a CTO full-time from April 2019, so it's been really 5 years. And I recently moved on to Civo, so it was exactly almost exactly 5 years, and just a little bit as a part of the 𝗙𝗧𝗏 journey. Service was released in 2020, so it was quite some time from the foundation of the company to the service to launch. It was like a year or 2 years. That's something I'm going to be touching on a little bit later. And it is definitely still growing strongly as one of the leading players in Japan. So if you think about the B2B payments, what is it? It's basically credit card payments, but for companies. and there are a few players in Japan, but we are probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest. Okay, so life and death moments. So I just want to share some of the experiences, really bad experiences in a way, so that I can kind of highlight what are the challenges with the fintech or startup or in the space of technical solutions providers. So the first one is early collapse of vendor solution. So when the company started around 2018, sorry, I keep pressing the wrong buttons. There you go. We had an idea that we would be providing this B2B payment. So we were trying to get this credit card solution working in Japan. And we had the idea that, and we had experience, especially the CEO and myself, were based in London, and we saw the rise of players like Monzo, Revolut, starting back then, where there was a lot of finance solutions, especially for the credit card or card payment in general. And we saw it, and it was great as a user, and we really liked it to the point that we wanted to replicate the same thing in Japan. And he did it. I was like, oh, I'm not going to do it. But later when I joined the journey, but when the journey started, we had an idea that there must be something that Monzo, Revolut, and all the firms in the UK have something in common, because they started almost around the same time. And this was because of some vendors are providing the payment solution at the core infrastructure. So we were trying to use them, like we were having discussions with multiple vendors, and be like, okay, this is going to be a great start. We're going to have the vendor doing almost all the dirty groundwork, and then we can just get started really quickly and just kind of piggybacking on the success of Monzo and others. But what happened was that it was a really difficult discussion with vendor, because of the vendor solution didn't work in Japan. And the reason is that the credit card, if you think about it, if you just have a credit card, you can just go to supermarket or whatever. You can just basically use it as long as it's Visa, MasterCard, Amex in most cases. And which is true. And you can go to Japan, have your credit card here, and then it would work. The problem that we saw was that when it comes to a payment and when it comes to B2B solutions, the companies do care about the receipts and what the payment information, the actual details about the payment. What happened back then, and we found out, was that when it comes to a Japanese market, South Korean market, Chinese market, where they have different languages, different characters, they have different ways of communicating where the vendors were, what location it was, stuff like that, where it would be just English in usual cases, or alphabets that you would just usually be able to pass. But in Japan, South Korea, and China, it was difficult. And that was one of the reasons why we had this conversation with the vendor and partner. We settled in one, that they were very curious about it. They were very curious about the Japanese market being one of the large markets in Japan, in Asia, and they didn't have a way to actually go into it because of this restriction or kind of limitation that the language was a barrier to entry. So we were trying to work out with them to make sure that everything works. But in the end, what turned out was that it was too difficult, to the point that they couldn't really get a solution out in the promised 2 months timeline that they originally came up with. And we had a conversation that they would have to have 6 months at least, and that was outside of our timeline, so we couldn't really agree to it. We had our CEO back then, who was based in Japan, flew over to the UK. We had a conversation offline. It was before COVID, so we had offline meeting, figuring out what the milestones are, if there is anything we can do to speed up the process, if there's anything we can do for their development, and it just ended up that it didn't really work. So the vendor solution collapsed really early on, and that really changed the roadmap. It really changed the timeline that we were originally sticking to. Originally, we're discussing with investors, and what turned out was that, okay, what do we do? Do we have to find another vendor that could potentially work, or do we just build it from scratch or do something else? Do it as something else, as in like completely, not just do a payment solution, but something else. What we came up with that back then was that we knew that we wanted to do a payment solution because we very much appreciated the payment solution, the kind of evolution of payment solution in the UK and how it's just so automatic and so easy to use. We wanted to bring that. And that was the reason why the company started. So the vendor was an easy way to get started and get kick-started, but at the same time, we didn't have to use it. And when it came to the vendor solution collapse with this particular vendor, we decided, okay, what is it that we want to do? We want to do is provide a great UX and really fast iterations of changes so that maybe it doesn't work with Japanese characters in the first release, but we could do that in like a week time or 2 weeks time. So what we wanted to do was to provide a better UX, and for that, we could just say that, okay, we're going to build it rather than relying on someone else, which may actually not work. So when it comes to vendor or any solution that you would use, obviously you can, and obviously you might have better value out of it, but it isn't that how we climb is important. It's never that vendor product is going to be the most critical piece. It's that why we climb is important, why we are doing the business is important, and that's why we said, okay, we're going to do from scratch, we're going to build a payment solution from scratch, and that really meant, that was a very clear message for everyone that, yeah, this is what we want to do, and this is why we started the company in the first place. So that was one of the life and death moments, and obviously that had a lot of implications to the investor relationship and fundraising. I'm not going to talk about it. You can ask me in the pub or whatever. And the next one is about cloud provider release leading to a severe outage. And this was on July 28th, 2020, and I know exactly the date because it was horrendous. And it took 71 hours to resolve, and during that 71 hour, I slept 3 hours, so 1 hour each day, and that was really bad, and I still do remember that. Still have this nightmare of waking up, I'm like, is there any solution? It's still not working, and kind of going back to debugging. So what happened, so in the slide, I was not gonna pinpoint whoever it is, but it is Google Cloud. But what happened was that on 28th of July, we woke up with an alert saying that there was no transaction or whatsoever. So 2020 is the time that it's the service launch was 2020, June 2020. And this incident, this severe outage happened on July 2020, which is just a month in. So we didn't have that many clients, but all the clients were very excited to use our product. And all of a sudden, things stopped working and everything was just not working. The reason was that the connection we had to Visa, maybe you saw quickly, we provide a credit card with partnership with Visa. So we connected Visa data center with the Visa backend system. And how we connect through is from Google Cloud to our data center, on-premise data center, and then to Visa. The only connection to Visa was allowed from on-prem data center, so that's why we had to do it. And the cloud, we just chose GCP back then for various reasons. And we definitely didn't think that the Google would be a problem, because maybe we did something wrong with the data center. That data center had some strange setup, which I'm going to talk about in a bit as well. So we started investigating in our solution, in our code base, and also network and all the everything for almost like 48 hours. And on the side of it, also we talked to Google support if they can figure out if there's anything wrong from their side. And they said nothing is wrong, everything is fine, but after 60 hours or so, it's ridiculous, 60 hours I was basically awake for 58 hours. We finally got connected to Google support, kind of like level L1, L2, L3, I think, like the highest level of support. For some reason, like we just got randomly, this person was assigned for some random reason, and this person was starting to investigate the issue, and he was like, okay, this may actually be a problem on their side, on the Google side. And it turned out that July 28th, there was a release just before that on the Google side, so we didn't do anything about it, but on Google side, they had some release in the network infrastructure. So we had a very reasonable, resiliency setup with the network that if one region goes down or if one zone goes down, still another zone would be available. But because of this network infrastructure that Google had, would change the entire region and actually a few regions around the globe. So it was basically affecting everyone in Asia, but with specific vendor hardwares. So we were hit, but not too many other customers were hit. And we go into the call and we investigated, and it turned out that they had a problem. They had to figure out what to do with the release, and we negotiated so long, and then finally, after 71 hours, they roll back the release. And that was the resolution. Like, I wish I could just ask them to just roll back or just tell me the release details, but they didn't have so much of the details because they didn't think that there would be so much problem. After that, obviously, we were in close contact with Google, so they gave us so much context about why the changes are being made, what are the other network-related changes were planned in the next month or two, and when they rolled back the release, obviously they had to rework the same upgrade or change. So when they were planning it, they gave us really early advance notice and also all the checkout steps that we can take actions for. So Google, I was hating it on the day, but at the same time, they gave us a lot of clarity why it was going wrong, and I think that was something that cloud provider could do, may not do, may do, but maybe you have to actually take into account, because it does mean that big players do bad things as well. They are not perfect. And that leads to another network-related problem that we had, which is system instability related to network, and some ridiculous solution that we had to come up with. So this one is also a network-related issue where we basically lost connection to the data center to Visa again. But it was not because of Google, and we could see that there was, we immediately asked Google, is there any release that you did? Because it was after, it was like 2021, 2022. We asked them whether it was something related to release, and they could confirm that there was nothing significant from their side. And it turned out that we didn't have too many changes in our system, so it was likely that it was hardware related to the data center, which we don't really quite have control over, or Google again. It turned out that it was hardware related from our hardware, and the problem was that every 6 hours, connection would drop for 1 minute. So 1 minute, just 1 minute, the card wouldn't work. But after 1 minute, everything starts to, back to normal, which sounds like not a big problem, but because any payment can happen anytime, especially if you're doing, ordering online and stuff, your actual payment happens in random hours, maybe midnight, maybe 2 in the morning, maybe 9 in the morning, it could be in the noon, maybe sometimes that you just don't think that the actual payment would happen. So payment can happen at any time, so we couldn't afford that 1 minute of downtime, but we couldn't figure out why it was 6 hours, and we didn't know why it was 1 minute. But one thing that we found out, not the first occasion, but the second occasion, we saw the 1 minute drop, the connection drop, and then we tried to reconnect, and it worked. So during the 1 minute cycle, during the 6 hour kind of iteration, there is 1 minute that we can just say, okay, reconnect manually, and that would reconnect and that would establish the connection fine, payment would just work fine. But there was no other solution that we can find because it was hardware related, there was some vendor that we needed to go through. We couldn't really find an automation, we couldn't really find a proper resolution back then. So what happened was that, okay, every 6 hours we have to manually poke it, say reconnect every 6 hours. So it's like 8 p.m. right now, it's fine, 8 p.m., you can just refresh. What's after 8 p.m., it's gonna be 2 in the morning. Someone has to be awake in 2 in the morning to hit the refresh button. And that lasted for 4 weeks. And the reason why it was 4 weeks was just because we couldn't find the solution, the permanent solution, that would be safe enough to implement. We had some solution that we thought about, but it would give us another 2 minutes of downtime or 3 minutes of downtime. We didn't want to do that. We said that in the first dilemma or the issue with the vendor, that we wanted to provide the best UX. And for the best UX, obviously payment should work regardless all the time, every minute, 24/7. So from that sense, we couldn't afford that 2-minute or 3-minute or downtime, even if it was maintenance, even if it was something that we know that it would be a permanent solution. We wanted to provide a solution that would work seamlessly without any downtime. So that took 4 weeks to have a proper implementation in place so that we can monitor it and also we can make sure that nothing would be dropped. And that meant that during that 4 weeks, someone had to be awake at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning and then do the refresh manually. And this refresh action is simple enough, but if you do it horribly, it can actually disconnect entirely. So it was that it had to be every 6 hours, and also it had to be 2 or more people to actually monitor that no one is doing something ridiculous. It's just a few clicks, but 1 click could actually lead to a massive outage. So for that reason, 6 hours, every 6 hours, we did that. And that was only with 10 engineers trying to sort out what time slot that we're going to work. It was during the weekend as well, during the holiday as well, so everything, we had to do that. But we did it because we had to. So sometimes manual workaround is necessary in a way, and it is maybe actually a good solution. If you know that there is a permanent solution coming around, and if you know that that's what the customer wants. So when it comes to life and death moments, I think we had the chance, and I think it happened, those problems, those challenges happened in a way that we weren't bombarded by the business requirements or the business users. Users did understand what we were going through, and also for some cases like a manual refresh, reconnect, we tried to make sure that the clients would not know. Maybe it was not a great experience for us. It was a horrible work-life balance, but we had to do it, we did it. And when it comes to doing something like that, coming up with a solution, the key is that there is a consistent message that we want to serve our customers and we want to serve our clients, making sure that their belief and trust in our system is not damaged. What Achieve trusts is the consistent message to them and also to the team internally. So a quick recap. So what happened was the multiple incidents, and there are so many more incidents that I can talk about for on and on, but I know that there's an England game started 2 minutes ago, so we should probably get going soon. So quick recap. So consistency is the key. We should really be, anyone in the startup or any team should have a consistent message all the time so that we can really root to the message why we are doing the business, why we are actually doing the things that we are doing. And that was the client success, the best UX when it comes to payment and when it comes to B2B payment. That was our mission, that was something that we wanted to do. And that was something that we saw back then, we felt back then, we had a challenge, so many challenges like that. And we do foresee that. We see that challenge, similar challenge coming up somewhere down the line. And we definitely don't want to have this manual workaround, but at the same time, if the consistent message is there, why not? It's going to work, and it's going to serve your clients, serve our customers, serve our belief, then why not? I think that's the message that I carried and I got to understand firsthand. I talked briefly about a team of 10 engineers or so, and building a team was really difficult, partially because of startup, because people didn't know about it. We tried to sell it as a fintech startup, but people didn't really understand what fintech is. So people were kind of afraid of fintech, the terminology, and which is kind of understandable because you're actually dealing with so much money and so much at stake. So we took the time to build a team, and it was 7 people for 2 years in the first place. So until the actual service launch, we were only 7 people from the beginning. So I was like the 3rd person to join the team, and it was only 7 people. And we stuck with it because we thought that we could believe in this consistent message that we want to build this best UX for the users, for the payment, and we couldn't feel that other candidates that we had along the line wouldn't actually stand behind that message. So it took a really long time. We are around 140, 150 people now, I hear. probably more at this point. But that is with the message that has been always consistent, and now people stand behind it. People talk about the consistent message. All the mission statement has been, all the mission value and vision statements are around the same message that we want to serve the customer with the best UX. And when it comes to fintech, so it was difficult with the hiring, but fintech is also just finance is tech. I come from investment background, where I was in this massive finance industry, where fintech was kind of thought about like a new technology, but finance has been always a tech. And from that sense, what I got to see from the startup experience is that fintech is not that different. Maybe the scale is different, maybe the money involved is different, but what we were trying to do is quite similar to any big players in the finance. So finance really needs a technical solution, but fintech startup especially could maybe give a bit more shift or give a bit more change to the finance industry as a whole. I think that's what happened with the payments in the UK, and I think we feel it, or we may not even feel it anymore, that everything is so automatic, so easy to use, but it's not always the case in other countries. So fintech has definitely driven a lot of changes, but it's just essentially tech, so it doesn't have to be fintech, it can be tech, it can be finance. And with that, quick reference of the link, slide again, this QR code is a slide as well, but yeah, thank you very much.
You can tab out and then the questions will. And also, if anyone's got any questions. Oh, is it delete?
There's none.
Has it come through?
I guess there is none, so we are ready for the pub and watch football. Please.
So you mentioned you had that outage where every 6 hours you had to get up and fix something manually. Did it not help that you're in different time zones? You mentioned that you're in London and the rest is in Japan. At that point, the actual time zones work in your favor, don't they? Because you're not waking up at night daylight.
It's true, but at the same time, the time zone only worked for a few cases, and especially because I was the only person who was in London at the time, someone had to wake up in Japan just to make sure that I'm not doing something stupid. So there was one person, so it is true that not everyone had to wake up in the morning, but someone had to make sure that every 6 hours, it had to be exactly 6 hours. It's not 6 o'clock, it's 6:02 perhaps, and it had to be 6:02, not 6:01, not 6:03, it had to be 6:02. From that sense, it was difficult to time it, and there was one person who was waking up all the time in Japan. Feel bad for him. And I was doing something similar if there was no coverage. So in a way, time zone definitely did help, but still painful.
If you did it all again, what would you do different?
One thing I would say is that I would still, if I were to go back in time, I would still go with Google, just because of the support that we got after it was amazing. Maybe start with a support call a little bit earlier so that we can really get onto the page with a call with Google support L3 if they can early on, so that we didn't have to spend 71 hours and maybe 10 hours instead.
You talk a little bit like one cloud provider. Have you considered after the outage particularly to access multiple providers to make sure that you never go down? Or was a limitation for Japan to be able to achieve that?
That's a very good question, and during that 71-hour outage, first 24 hours or so, we tried to rectify whatever the problem is. And during the next 24 hours, we were obviously on the call and trying to figure out. One thing that we knew was that, I didn't talk about the technical details, but we are heavily on Kubernetes. So we stayed with cloud native quite a bit and the cluster, not so much on serverless, because we actually cared about the vendor locking quite a bit. And for that reason, we thought about moving everything from Google to AWS at the time. So if there was no resolution in like 60th, 70th hour mark, we were actually starting the work to migrate everything from GCP to AWS. And after the incident, after the resolution, we did start to have AWS as a kind of backup. And also during that network incident that we had in the third challenge that I mentioned, we were actually using AWS for that. So there were a few things that we did with GCP and multi-cloud, multi-cluster network setup, and that's what I usually talk about in technical talks. Like I have been very much a fan of Kubernetes, Istio, service mesh, and network layers. So from that sense, that was definitely one of the solutions that we looked at. But in a way, we did it after the incident happened because we learned a lesson that way.
You mentioned hiring is difficult. Did you make any like big mistakes where someone left the team and that demotivated the rest of the team?
So when it comes to the team building, it was difficult. When it comes to hiring, we made sure that we hire only the people we really truly felt that this person would fit. So in that sense, we didn't have mishire in a way, but at the same time, we did see some people moving on and then having less resource and less kind of headcount. But at the same time, we knew that when it comes to team building, we give the same message to the team saying that we want to build the best UX to the users. If there is this one person leaving because of XYZ reason, what is it that we can do? So from that sense, team building was around the same message. Team building was definitely difficult and time consuming, and we wanted to grow much, much faster, but we couldn't. But I guess it was the right thing that we did because we always wanted to root to our idea of why we're doing the business, why we want to bring the people is based on that reason where we want to serve customers with this payment solution. If they're not curious, they shouldn't be joining us. If they are curious enough, they might be able to join and leave and then maybe come back. And that happened as well. So from that sense, retention, hiring, there wasn't no catastrophic event like one person leaving and the massive thing happens. But it was just time consuming and it wasn't really as planned. So if that makes sense, that was difficult. But in a way, we gauged it, we knew it would be difficult to hire people, but we took it with massive time allocated so that we would hire the right person.
How much time was it?
So I mentioned the 7 people for 2 years, and obviously we were trying to hire more people. I think we were originally trying to hire 10 people in the first 2 years. We didn't hire any. We had some contractor to kind of play and start to have a feeling of how it is to work with us, and none of them worked. So in a way, we started with this contractor part-time agreement first, and then see if they like it for 2 years, for 10 people, for 10 headcounts, none of it worked. Next, obviously, year, there will be another 10 people or so that we wanted to bring in. We only brought in 2 in the end, and those 2 people are still with us and still working on the core product. And from there, I think we have been always hitting a target of hiring these many people in a year time. I think we never hit that. I think we would say that if we can't hit it, and for that reason we have to have the priority change to the product, that's okay. It's fine as long as we are sticking to the mission that we want to build the best product. And we said, okay, we have to take it as reality. So in the way that we said, if it works as planned, perfect, great, absolutely. And it would definitely not go over the plan because of the budget, but we would be so strict to the point that we would always, I guess, just fail to hire as planned, but it was okay in a way.
Sure. So you talk a little bit about the limitation that you have to actually work with all the payment providers at the time. Has that reality shifted today, or do you actually are becoming the #1 or one of the biggest players because that specific limitation within the market?
I think when it comes to the Japanese market specifically, we have the implementation quite solid enough that we will be part of the leading players, probably the biggest and the most leading team and most leading solution, I guess in a way, the best solution out there. But the vendor solutions are there to capture all the different requirements. So for us, we are dropping some of the messages or some of the details as to maybe like, for instance, Korean message, we wouldn't really care, so we wouldn't be supporting it. But other vendors may actually work with all the languages, Korean, Chinese, whatever. So from that sense, I think for particularly Japanese market, we have the best. But for other for the other markets, it could be a quite different challenge, quite a bit of a different story. I don't know. I didn't really care.
The question was slightly different. It's like, if you have to start today,
Okay.
how easy it will be to accomplish that today comparing with 5 years ago with vendors?
With the knowledge that I have now, it would be easy enough to implement. And considering the drawbacks and potential delays that vendor products could have, I would probably start from scratch myself as well. Just because I've done it, I know how much it takes, and it is not fun. It is not an exciting development, but in a way that if that's the heart of the product and heart of the problem, then we would do it, and I think I would do it.
So you set out on a mission to deliver the best product, and you're saying that you want the best user experience. What would you say are the key metrics for that? Like, how did you make sure that you're actually delivering the best UX? And how can you tell us about how you improve from like one point where the metrics are low to somewhere where you really are?
Absolutely. So the metrics were a few things, but when it started, it was tough time of the payment solution. So that when you use a card, whether it fails or not, people don't really care how long it takes. You tap a card, maybe at some scenarios where like you're in a train station, you tap a card, you want to get through as quickly as you can. But in other scenarios, like if you're a supermarket, if you're doing a restaurant, you don't really care when you tap. It can take 5 seconds or 10 seconds. It's fine as long as it goes through. Sometimes the network is rubbish and just doesn't work. So from that sense, our metric was that how much does the payment actually go through? Is there any downtime in regards to the payment failing? And I think we started with trying to hit zero transaction failure entirely, and I think we hit the zero transaction failure in probably half a year or so. That was also a thanks to the system 𝗙𝗲𝗄 provides. So there is some safety net that we can use from 𝗙𝗲𝗄, so that 𝗙𝗲𝗄 can help us with some kind of stability and uptime. But also our system was made sure that that was one key metric that when you use the card, everything should work. You shouldn't really worry about this card may not work or may work. That should be